The Path of Shadows and Light, the tragic redemption of Zhang Xiaofan. Once a disciple, then a demon, finally a wanderer between worlds, whose journey through love, loss, power, and pain rewrote the boundaries of good and evil in a battle that shattered heaven and reforged his destiny with silence and sacrifice. After the tumultuous events of the first season of Noble Aspirations, the second chapter of Zhang Xiaofan's saga begins in the shadow of tragedy. The fall of Bi Yao, her body suspended in an eternal slumber after sacrificing herself to save Xiaofan, marked a turning point in his destiny. The once innocent disciple of the Qingyun sect, known for his gentle nature and unshakable loyalty, was now broken by grief. That grief became the gateway to a path few would dare to tread, one that would see him forsake the light to embrace the very darkness he once stood against. Stripped of clarity and seeking a way to save Bi Yao, Zhang Xiaofan vanished from the world he knew. He re-emerged under a new name, Gui Li, having joined the Ghost King sect, a faction deemed heretical and feared by the righteous sects. Unlike the Qingyun sect's philosophy of balance and purity, the Ghost King sect thrived on forbidden arts, demonic cultivation, and the rejection of celestial order. Gui Li was not merely a name change, but a metamorphosis. He was no longer the naive boy of the past. Though he still carried remnants of his humanity, the sorrow carved into his soul now shaped every step he took. His ascent within the Ghost King sect was swift. The Ghost King, recognizing the immense potential within Gui Li, trained him personally. Gui Li mastered the dark arts, tempered by a controlled fury. Unlike the blind hatred of many Ghost King disciples, his motivations were precise, centered around Bi Yao's revival. The promise of resurrection was dangled before him, a lure that ensured his loyalty, even as doubts simmered beneath the surface. Though he wore the black robes of the sect and wielded the bloodthirsty sinister orb, a part of Zhang Xiaofan still clung to the ideals of compassion, justice, and love. Across the cultivation world, this transformation did not go unnoticed. Qingyun, the sect that once nurtured him, now viewed Gui Li as a traitor. Yet within those stone halls, Lu Shuiqi, a stoic and powerful swordswoman who had trained alongside Xiaofan, refused to forget the boy he had once been. Her outward composure betrayed none of the conflict within, but she watched each news of Gui Li's movements with subtle anguish. She saw through his fury, understanding that his descent into darkness was a reaction to pain rather than a surrender to evil. Gui Li's internal conflict deepened with each passing mission. Though he carried out the Ghost King's orders, he often spared the innocent and questioned the indiscriminate cruelty of his peers. The Ghost King, a master of manipulation, allowed these divergences as long as Gui Li remained useful. The central question of resurrection haunted Gui Li daily. Bi Yao's body, preserved in a crystalline tomb deep within the Ghost King's palace, was a shrine to his suffering. He would often sit in silence by her side, whispering promises to bring her back, even as he ventured deeper into forbidden arts to find the means. Meanwhile, the balance of power across the land began to shift. The Ghost King sect grew bolder, attacking minor sects, stealing sacred artifacts, and destabilizing alliances. Their end goal was no longer hidden. They sought the means to wield the ancient Zhu Xian sword, a weapon said to contain limitless celestial might, capable of challenging the heavens themselves. The sword's history was soaked in blood and divine retribution, and its reappearance signaled a new era of chaos. Gui Li found himself dispatched to seek relics and texts that could guide the sect to the Zhu Xian sword. On one such mission, he encountered remnants of his past, Lin Jingyu, his sworn brother from the Grass Temple village. Once like brothers, they now stood on opposite ends of the battlefield. Lin Jingyu had remained true to Qingyun's path, believing in the righteousness of order and the teachings of their sect. Though they fought, neither struck the fatal blow. Their confrontations were not just about ideology, but also about sorrow, each trying to reclaim the other from their chosen path. Beyond personal entanglements, the cultivation world itself began to crack. Ancient sects like the 10,000 Poison sect and Beast God cult rose to prominence, each harboring secrets and ambitions of their own. The Holy Maiden of the Ghost King sect emerged from secrecy, her power and influence rivaling even Gui Li. Her presence added a new layer of intrigue, as she too sought control over the sect's future, and viewed Gui Li as either a threat or an ally to be manipulated. Back in the Ghost King's stronghold, the leader pushed forward with a grand plan. He sought to merge dark cultivation with celestial power, using sacred artifacts and the life force of captives to initiate a massive ritual. Gui Li, tasked with gathering components for the rite, began to see the cost it would demand. Innocents were to be sacrificed, entire villages drained of life. He voiced his concern but was met with cold assurances that the ends justified the means. Torn between his personal mission and moral revulsion, Gui Li's faith in the Ghost King began to fracture. The more he immersed himself in dark cultivation, the clearer it became that power alone could not mend a broken soul or reverse death's grip. He discovered ancient texts that hinted at resurrection rituals, but all came with terrible prices. Some required the destruction of cities, others demanded the death of a kindred soul. The dream of reviving Bi Yao, once noble and sorrowful, now stood bathed in blood and compromise. Gui Li began to see that the path he was on might not bring her back, but might destroy what was left of her memory. At the same time, Lu Xueqi grew more involved in the unfolding war. Though her loyalty to Qingyun never wavered, her mind often returned to Xiaofan. She volunteered for increasingly dangerous missions to counter the Ghost King sect's expansion, and fate often drew her into Gui Li's path. Their battles were fierce, but beneath every swing of her sword lay a question. Could he still be saved? Each clash became a conversation in steel and spirit, unspoken yet heavy with longing, sorrow, and what-ifs. As Gui Li's reputation grew among the Ghost King sect's ranks, so did the whispers of rebellion. Some viewed him as a messianic figure who would lead the sect into a new age, while others saw him as a half-hearted outsider clinging to his past. The Ghost King, ever watchful, began to doubt the loyalty of his prodigy. He ordered spies to monitor Gui Li and devised tests of allegiance that pushed him further into moral darkness. The turning point came when Gui Li was commanded to destroy a village rumored to harbor a fragment of the Zhu Xian sword. When he arrived, he found only elderly cultivators and children. The fragment had long since vanished. Faced with a cruel order and innocent lives, Gui Li chose defiance. He faked the mission's success and smuggled the villagers to safety, knowing full well the price of betrayal. The Ghost King's fury was measured but deep. He said nothing, but the cold silence that followed was more ominous than any outburst. Gui Li returned to the tomb of Bi Yao, knelt beside her crystal coffin, and finally confessed to himself that he was lost. Neither demon nor saint, he was something else, an echo of a life interrupted by tragedy. Soon after, the Ghost King revealed his final plan. The sect would storm Qingyun Mountain, seizing the remaining pieces of the Zhu Xian sword and executing a celestial-breaking ritual at its summit. Gui Li, torn and exhausted, knew this would be no ordinary battle. It would be a war to end all balance. He had little time to choose where he stood. On the eve of the invasion, Gui Li wandered the grounds of the Ghost King's fortress, watching disciples prepare for slaughter. He touched Bi Yao's tomb once more, whispering not a promise, but an apology. Then, with the dawn rising red as blood, he left the fortress with no word. His heart had made its decision, though the path ahead would demand everything he had left to give. As dawn broke over Qingyun Mountain, a storm gathered not in the skies but in the hearts of all who stood upon the brink of battle. The Ghost King sect marched with terrifying unity, its disciples steeped in shadow, its leaders bearing arcane weapons and rituals older than memory. At their helm stood the Ghost King himself, draped in darkness, his face a mask of calm tyranny, his goal unshaken to unseat the celestial order and reshape the world in his image. The Qingyun sect, fortified by its ancient power, prepared for the onslaught with grim resolve. All roads had led here to this final clash between light and shadow, conviction and ambition. But as the vanguard of darkness descended, Gui Li was no longer among them. He had turned his back on the Ghost King sect in silence, not in protest but in quiet resolve. With his cloak of shadows trailing behind him like a broken wing, he climbed Qingyun Mountain, not as a disciple or enemy, but as a man seeking redemption. The weight of every sin, every choice, and every moment of doubt hung on his shoulders. He carried no army, only his dual-bladed legacy, the righteous Tianya sword in one hand and the demonic sinister orb in the other. Together, they embodied the war within him. As the battle erupted, fire and lightning seared the skies, clashing energies echoing through the heavens. Cultivators from all corners of the land, righteous and demonic, faced off in desperate struggle. Sects fell, towers crumbled, and blood soaked the sacred earth. In the heart of the chaos, Gui Li moved like a specter. He did not fight to kill, but to prevent. He shielded the young and disarmed the fanatical. His presence confused both allies and enemies. Many attacked him on instinct. Others hesitated, unsure whether he was a savior or traitor. At the peak of the mountain, the Ghost King began the celestial breaking ritual, harnessing the stolen relics and the fragmented Zhu Xian sword. He drew upon the lives of countless sacrificed souls, conjuring a storm of dark energy that bent the very laws of the universe. His goal was no longer just domination, but transcendence to tear open the heavens, challenge the immortals, and rewrite the balance of creation. The sky darkened into a spiral of void, threatening to consume all beneath it. Gui Li confronted him at the summit. There, under the blood-red moon, stood the master and the student, no longer mentor and disciple, but adversaries bound by destiny. The Ghost King, seeing Guili's betrayal, offered no words, only power. Their clash erupted with elemental fury. The sinister orb roared with demonic might, and the Tianya sword shimmered with forgotten purity. Their battle cracked the mountain's peak, sent tremors across the land, and distorted the very fabric of reality. Neither could overpower the other, for Guili now embodied both light and dark, and the Ghost King, consumed by ambition, had become something monstrous, no longer a man but a conduit of chaos. As their duel reached its zenith, Lu Shuiqi arrived with the remaining forces of Qing Yun. She bore the sect's ancient relic, a counter to the Zhuxian sword's corrupt fragment, and joined the battle not to destroy Guili, but to protect him. Fighting back to back, they formed an alliance born not of trust but understanding. Their swords moved in harmony, one of clarity, one of sorrow. In that moment, their unspoken bond, buried under years of silence, manifested in purpose. The Ghost King's power, however, proved overwhelming. Drawing from his ritual, he summoned an otherworldly force, threatening to annihilate not just Qing Yun, but the natural laws themselves. Mountains shook, rivers reversed, and the stars dimmed. Just as the world teetered on the edge, Guili made the ultimate decision. He realized that to stop the ritual, he would need to destroy the corrupted Zhuxian fragment, but doing so would mean unleashing its energy through himself. He invoked the twin powers within him, the darkness of the sinister orb and the purity of the Tianya sword, and cast them into the heart of the ritual. The force that followed was not destruction, but purification. Light and shadow collided in a final storm, unraveling the forbidden magic, tearing apart the ghostly portal, and casting the Ghost King into the void he had created. But it came at a cost. The explosion consumed the summit. When the dust settled, the Ghost King sect's forces were routed. Their leader gone, their ambition shattered, they fled into the wilderness, fragmented and powerless. Qing Yun's sect, though victorious, bore deep scars. Many of its defenders had fallen, and its sanctum was damaged beyond recognition. The war had ended, but not without loss. Guili was nowhere to be found. Lu Shuiqi searched the ruins of the summit for hours, calling not with voice but with heart. And then at the foot of Biyao's crystal tomb, unharmed despite the surrounding devastation, she found him. Bloodied, unconscious, but alive. His weapons shattered, his energy spent, but his breathing shallow and real. He had survived not by conquering, but by surrendering, by becoming the bridge between two opposing worlds, burning himself to mend them. Days passed. The world outside slowly returned to stillness. Qing Yun's sect opened its gates to reconciliation, beginning efforts to repair both its halls and its philosophies. Many questioned whether righteousness could ever exist without understanding the price of balance. Lu Shuiqi remained by Guili's side during his long recovery, and in the stillness between them, a new emotion began to surface, not built on the fiery passions of youth, but on quiet solidarity born from shared wounds. As weeks turned into months, Guili awoke not as Zhang Xiaofan, nor as Guili, but as a man no longer bound by names. He refused Qing Yun's invitation to return. He also shunned the remnants of the Ghost King sect, who begged him to lead them. He was done with factions, done with war. With Biyao still asleep, unchanged, he chose instead a path of pilgrimage. Not to flee, but to heal. He walked away from the mountain with no destination, only a desire to find meaning beyond revenge, power, and pain. Lu Shuiqi watched him go once more, her heart aching not with regret, but with acceptance. She had learned that to love someone did not always mean holding on. It meant letting them find themselves, even if that journey took them far away. In time, tales of Guili faded into legend. Some said he wandered the distant mountains, teaching forgotten villages. Others claimed he became one with the heavens, his soul released after fulfilling its burden. Some said Biyao eventually awoke, and that the two lived hidden and free from the burden of the world. But no one ever truly knew. What remained was his story, a tale etched into the soil of Qing Yun, and the memories of those who had walked beside him. The boy who once held only a wooden sword and innocent dreams had become the man who bore the weight of two worlds and chose neither. He had walked through grief, power, and betrayal, only to find that true strength lay in knowing when to stop fighting and simply live. Thus, the saga of Zhang Xiaofan, Guili, and all the aspirations they once held came to an end, not with triumph or tragedy, but with quiet redemption. A noble aspiration fulfilled not by conquering fate, but by rising above it.